Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. Want to have some Spurs talk. The big question is at this point in the season, will the Spurs make the playoffs? Right now, they're in the seventh seed, tied with a bunch of teams, basically three through all the way down going to 10. I think there's only, 2 to 2.5 games of separation, Portland on down through Utah. The Spurs find themselves in a bit of a pickle with a very, very tough schedule. And myself being a Spurs fan chose to speak on this briefly. So we have a big game late tonight against Houston. 16 games remaining. And, right now, yes, as a Spurs fan, I'm worried. Now, we've been very fortunate, very blessed. People that are fans of other teams, you guys can probably look at our situation like, well, they've won 50 games for the last 20 plus years, 5 championships, and this, that, and the third. But in this particular season, and I said this going back to my Kawhi Leonard video, this kind of seems like the lost season for the Spurs, and maybe we're now paying the Duncan tax. And what I mean by the Duncan tax is anytime you lose a player, a top 10 all-time player like that, the Spurs really didn't pay any type of tax for it. Kawhi Leonard, seamlessly filled in to that MVP caliber role. We won 60-something games, went to the Western Conference Finals, and just business kept moving as usual. And I think that got some of us in the mindset of after we lost Tim that we were going to just continue to keep this thing rolling. And one of the things we haven't factored in is just injuries, attrition, age, all sorts of things. And in this season, obviously with Kawhi Leonard not being available only but for 9 games, you're starting to see the impact of that now. I know a lot of people talked last year about, well, Kawhi Leonard's not really an MVP candidate because look how great his team's record is when he doesn't play. Well, yeah, in short spurts, the Spurs coaching staff and roster is good enough to survive. But as you've now seen over the course of 67 games played, it's an average team. And in the Western Conference, they are struggling to make the playoffs. And one of the things you're seeing with the Spurs is the blown leads this year. Even against subpar teams, they had Golden State on the ropes, but even against subpar teams like the Lakers and some of these other teams, the leads they've blown over the last month. I mean, February, they won 2 games. And many of those games, they had the lead late in the fourth quarter. But what you're seeing is when you don't have a closer, when you don't have somebody last 3-4 minutes of a basketball game to run plays for, when things start breaking down, who can make a play? And right now, the Spurs are extremely limited on playmakers. You have Aldridge, who's great, first 35, 40 minutes of the game, post-wise and even mid-post, mid-range jump shot, he has that all. But he's not at the level that he once was, even back when he was in Portland. I mean, he's 32 years old to where he can execute like that, tough shots down the stretch. Even in the Golden State game, you saw he's shooting a lot of followaways because there's nothing else going in the offense. You can't blame him for that. Now, if they're able to get Kawhi Leonard back, we're hearing he could possibly play Thursday night against the Pelicans. Now, you guys also have to factor in it's going to take at least 2 weeks for him to get up, at least 2 weeks from a conditioning standpoint. That doesn't even factor in flow of the offense. We have to figure out how to ingratiate him back in while also keeping LaMarcus confident. These are all things that we thought we were going to get answered early in the season, and now here we are, mid-March, not only trying to figure that out, but trying to get into the playoffs. Now, I will say this: if we're able to, say we're in the 8th seed and we have to play Houston, we will scare the death out of Houston. And Houston fans, if you're honest with yourself, you don't want to play San Antonio on the 8 hole with a Kawhi Leonard coming back. You don't want that. So now as a Spurs fan, comfortably, I would like for us to get into that 6 or 5 spot. I think we do still have a chance. I know the schedule is very, very rough. We have to play Houston twice. We have another game against Golden State. We have the Pelicans. We have 2 games against the Wizards, in Utah, who we have not beaten this year. I think they're 3-0 against us. So there's a lot of tough games ahead, but there's also an opportunity, just looking at the schedule, to get some games under our belt, whether it's Sacramento, the Magic, the Lakers, even though we blew that lead a couple weeks ago. There's some opportunities for us to, these last 16 games, if we can go maybe 10-6, I think that might be enough to get us in. At this point, it's a roll of the dice, especially with how the other teams are looking. But it's been a fun ride. Whether however this goes, I'm still thinking more long term. As a Spurs fan, the best thing that can happen is Kawhi Leonard signs his supermax contract in the offseason. Because let's be realistic, in my opinion, we're not a championship contender this season. And I just want to get that out the way right now. Do I think that we could scare the hell out of a team in the first round and maybe beat somebody like a Houston and upset them? Yes. But this team right now, they're going to have to move some things around and make some trades, because some of these teams in the West have caught up in terms of the stability in their organizations and player evaluations and some of the talent that they're bringing in. The other thing that you saw with the Spurs this year, just the talent, lack of playmaking ability outside of Kawhi Leonard. That has to get upgraded in the offseason. I know they've banked on guys that they've found, either the draft and stash guys or some of the undrafted folks like a Bryn Forbes or a Danny Green, even, who they pulled from Cleveland many years ago. Some of those guys, it's just they are maxed out. They are maxed out in their ability, and it's not good enough down the end stretch of these games, which is why they're blowing so many of these leads. So, yes, I'm worried. Do I think we make the playoffs? Ultimately, yes, I think we do, because of Greg Popovich, because I think he will figure out how to get Kawhi Leonard reingratiated Thursday night. We'll see if he comes back. If he does, that'll be a very good sign. Another good sign, Rudy Gay is playing basketball. I'm excited to see them on the court together, some of these small ball lineups. So we'll see what happens. A long way to go, but if we can pull out one of these games, maybe against the Rockets tonight, maybe scare them a little bit, that'll go a long ways, because I believe if we lose tonight, we actually fall to the 10 hole because of the tiebreakers and whatnot. I mentioned earlier us losing 3 games to Utah already. So we'll see what happens, guys. Chime in with your thoughts on whether you think the Spurs will make the playoffs, or if this is the end of the run, and maybe long-term issues that could be foreseen if Kawhi Leonard decides he doesn't want to be here long-term. But we'll see. Thanks, guys, as always.